Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Toby Eunice with a Gypsy's Kiss. Stick with me a couple of seconds, and we'll have a conversation about the useless debate between hints and clues. All right. So, before we get started, there's a couple of things a couple of housekeeping elements I want to talk to you about a little bit before we go on with the program. And the first is that if you have any questions tonight and you want to make sure that we get them answered either by me or the members of the panel, send a text message with your question to 800-947-1043. That shows up on my iPhone in front of me, and I'll make sure that that question gets answered. If you just have general comments about the conversation, go ahead and make them in the room. I am able to see the room and some of those comments, and if they're appropriate, I'll address them. In addition to that, Shelley's producing tonight, so she can see any questions that you have in the room and get to us. But as I said, if you want to make sure they get answered, text them to me at 800-947-1043. So I invited this panel because I felt like this was a topic that could create a lot of consternation in the community because it could be perceived as offensive and anti-Fenn, as Toby is sometimes want to do. I don't want you to feel that way. This is not about being anti-Fenn. This is simply a decision we made that that the debate over hints and clues just wasn't helping us get closer to the treasure. What was a hint and what was a clue? In addition to that, it generated a lot of commentary on this video, and some of the commentary was even more exemplary of exactly what I was talking about, the discussion, a conversation, a debate over the difference between warm and tepid waters, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like we just spend too much time having those debates, the definitional debates, as opposed to looking at the incoming intelligence or the incoming counterintelligence. And it hurts us in terms of the amount of research time that we spend. So we took a stand yesterday. And the reason I invited this panel today is so that they can either talk me further into it or talk me further out of it by expressing their own opinions on the matter. And that's what we're going to talk about. So let me have the panel introduce themselves first. And then in addition to that, they're going to tell you where you can find them on the internet. So let's start with you, Pam.
Hi, I'm Pam Shotman, and I'm Ramblin' Pam on YouTube. And I also have a new Facebook page that's Ramblin' Pam. I don't have much on there yet, but I'm there.
By the way, if I haven't said this to you in an email, that one video that you did, the documentary style video that you did on Joseph Henry Sharp and Forrest Fenn was just amazing. Really enjoyed it. It was very well done. And over to it's going to be my left on the screen. Christy?
Hello. I go by K-Pro on the forums. Hint of Riches is the forum. Plus I have a new channel called The Raven's Nest, and Mike Calazar, I think he's in the room, is helping me immensely, and we have a Monday night show. And that's where you can find me.
Shelley Carney, since we're doing ladies first.
All right. Well, I'm Shelley Carney with a Gypsy's Kiss, and I also have my own channel, The Softer Side, and Toby and I will be live tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, and I hope you'll join us then.
And all the way from Tokyo, Japan, Michael Hu.
Hi, I'm Michael Hu. My email is meh.at.dyo@gmail.com.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Michael. And last but not least, Sean Martinez.
Sean Martinez. I'm a retired homicide detective who lives in New Mexico. You can find me at Figuring Out Forrest on YouTube, Figuring Out Forrest Fenn on Facebook, or the same at gmail.com.
And we have some search partners in the room, or some YouTube partners in the room as well. I noticed that Kyle Lazars is in the room, Christie's YouTube partner. And I noticed that Allie Jeffs is in the room, and that's Sean Martinez's search partner. I guess I could be more detailed, but we'll call it search partner for the moment. Okay, so here we go. So Shelley and I did a presentation yesterday where we discussed how we were finished with the idea of debating the difference between hints and clues. We didn't think it was getting anywhere. And so I went back to an old model that I was more experienced with, that I learned in the intelligence community. I actually referred to a field manual called Field Manual 22-2, where all the information that I presented yesterday can be found. And so I'm not making that idea up. But my point was, every time something came up, we didn't talk about whatever came up. We talked about, we debated whether it was a hint or a clue or a hint that led us to a clue, et cetera, as opposed to looking at the intelligence and ranking it. And I felt like we were spinning our wheels on it, and I felt like the community in general, it was. Now, the community is not supposed to do what I want it to do. The community can do whatever it wants to do. But I felt like if all of us spent fewer hours in debating the difference between hints and clues and analyzing the intelligence and then taking action, if it was possible to take action, whether or not that would benefit the community in its entirety. So let me start with a flat statement. I have, and I'll have to include Shelley, but she could nod her head in agreement or not. I have hereby, as of yesterday, declared that we will no longer debate the differences between hints and clues, that we will look at incoming intelligence and determine whether or not it's actionable. So, K-Pro, let's start with you. How good or how bad an idea is that?
So I always love the discussion, but I will say I disagree. And here's why for me, and this has been a recent revelation. I believe there are 9 clues that are physical locations in the poem. I hate the debate on clues versus poems in the poem. I hate the debate that's constant. So I love that the discussion's happening, but I do think it'll be important at the end of the day for the correct solve. So for me, everything is a hint. And there are things in the poem that are also hints that are more analogies or idioms or whatever you want to call them. But there are 9 physical locations to a correct solve. So I still think it's important, but it's not important until you get to the point where your boots on the ground or you are taking that next step and getting finalized on your solve. So that is the little piece of it where I do think hint clues. I was having a debate with somebody on Too Far to Walk, and that's so important in the poem, etc. And what is it? And I don't think that's an actual clue, but I do think it could be a hint. And I think there's a lot of conversation that can have around it. Normally speaking, it doesn't matter because you're exactly right. There's so much out there. Let's just discuss topics and concepts. But I do think at the end of the day, it'll be important again.
All right.
That's my 2 cents.
Let's pop over to Pam. Pam, same question. Hints, clues, am I crazy to ignore them? Or am I on to something here because you feel the same way or not?
Okay, so I do think that since Forrest Fenn said that there were 9 clues in the poem, but I think that he's added more clues since then. As far as where he talks about the chest is above 5,000, below 10,200. But I started thinking about what you said yesterday. Are they actionable? Are they credible? And so I don't believe that all of the clues that are out there now are actually something that you take action on, but I believe that they're credible because they're from Forrest Fenn.
I agree. I think as long as they're from Forrest Fenn, they have certain levels of credibility, and that credibility falls off, not rapidly, but it falls off at an even rate depending on how far away from Forrest that comment, that piece of intelligence occurred.
But I do think that for me, I still refer to them as clues.
You like the idea of referring to them as clues?
I do.
Well, we're going to come back to that in just a second. Let me get through this round with first Sean and Michael. So Sean, ignoring the differences between clues and hints. Good idea, bad idea, and why?
Well, I think it's a good idea in one regard. categorizing the degrees of significance of the clues or the hints that come in, and that information in regards to the relevance to the solution or whether it's credible, just as you've said. I've done this in the past with information in regards to investigations, whether it be a Crime Stopper tip or hundreds of Crime Stopper tips that come in. We categorize that information, or if it's in regards to solving a case and the different witnesses or evidence that we collect along the way on a case. So I believe the 9 that he has pointed out can be considered as core clues, which is how I've categorized them, as the core clues that he said. However, recently he said there's one good clue that searchers could think of themselves but haven't. So, I mean, how many more of those one good clues that Fenn can give out are there out there? So there are specifics to Fenn. Now, up to this point, we have all been pursuing Fenn's model in solving this poem and finding this chest. And the results have been 0 to this point. So, and there are a number of different types of thinkers who are searching and thinking and coming up with solutions in regards to this poem and finding this chest. His model so far for the search community has resulted with 0. So approaching it at a different way, in a different way, I believe is a good idea. And approaching the hints and the clues as one and all or all together as information or intelligence that you're receiving. I think that's an excellent idea to assist one in finding the chest.
And I do want to come back to a couple of points that Sean made. One of it is what the word that he used, tips, right? So the question, and we'll come back to it, but another point that Sean Martinez made was it's Fenn's model. Fenn made the initial distinction between hints and clues, and it was adopted by the community. And I think part of the challenge for me is in order to think differently from Fenn, one of the ways to do that is to stop talking like Fenn. And if he talks about hints and clues, then maybe one of the ways that we have to look at this treasure hunt in a different way is not to use his terminology, to create our own base for the terminology. Michael, so back to the same question that I asked everybody else. Am I wrong to ignore the difference between hints or clues, or am I right? And in either case, why?
Okay, well, right or wrong might be too strong a word, because I'm going to say you're right and you're wrong at different levels. Okay, so one, your wheel, process wheel. Analytics is one node on that process wheel. And we are all sort of presupposing that people have their own way of analyzing. Okay, but depending on your model for analysis, you may or may not ascribe different levels of importance or distinctions to these information sources. So I don't think you can look at that wheel and judge from that process whether or not to make a distinction. You need to take your analytic strategy into account. There are different levels of credibility between text, poem, and the later information that he's given up.
Agreed.
I do not want to use the terms hints or clues. And if the frustration comes from the terminology, I think the terminology should be junked simply because they're essentially synonyms for one another, and Forrest Fenn himself has not been consistent in the use of the terminology. So we can say we have a text, we have a poem, and we have later information. Okay, so these things inherently have different credibility levels. And so first of all, Forrest Fenn has said, all you really need, basically paraphrasing, is the poem. So Forrest himself has established different levels of credibility between the poem and the text. But he then also has suggested that you read the poem, read the text, read the poem, read the text. So that means that the importance of the text is not 0, but it occupies a different level, a different function or a different role in the analytics. And the later information are all, without question, afterthoughts, which means that when he was putting in all his effort and all his planning in order to produce the poem and the text, which was announced as a unit, essentially, the poem being in the book, the later information are little corrections, little afterthoughts. He sees the community he sees what's going on and he says, okay, we got to keep people out of the Rio Grande somehow. We have to release some information about this, some information about that. Or he might be frustrated at progress, and so he gives a little bit of a guidance in order to sort of help sharpen people's thinking, but it's afterthoughts. So 3 types of information, they all have their role. They have different levels of credibility established by Fenn himself, and they need to be considered. They each need to have a place in the successful analytics or successful solution.
All right. So, Christy, let's go back to you. Different question. Let's say that we're consistent with our use of hints and clues to the extent that we can be consistent with what Fenn has said. As Michael has said, he's used them interchangeably. Then and the point at which I got interested in the conversation was when he said, well, there's clues and then there's hints and then there's a couple of aberrations around the edges. And I thought to myself, well, where does that fall? What is that, a hint, a clue, and how does it impact everything that I've done thus far? And so that was the point that I started thinking to myself, maybe I don't need to follow his model. Maybe rather than following his model, I create my own model. Sean used the word tips. I mean, if everything was just a tip in one way or the other with different, levels of A, relevance, and B, interpretation. So tell me, why should I continue to follow Fenn's model for all of this? Poem, text, as Michael described, poem, text, everything that happens over hints versus clues, aberration. Why do I have to keep doing that? Why not look at it in a more what Michael used the phrase, more logical, rational way?
Yep. Well, and I actually had noted for you and Sean, I think you're exactly right. The only way that we're going to find this is not to do it the way that Forrest said, where you go through the poem and then you go to the 9 locations, et cetera. We're going to have to, sorry, Forrest, if you're watching, we're going to have to take this from him if we're going to solve this. And I think we need to think differently. I think we need to look at things that he has maybe not told us to look at that are important. And I think that will come up in the off season. I think some of us are thinking we don't want to do this the way Forrest said, because we've been trying that for 8 years and there's 350,000 come home with nothing. No matter if you say you found it or not, you haven't. So I think it is time to flip the conversation. And here's the one that I want to throw out that I kind of take exception to what you said yesterday, Toby. I think it was a good point, but I want to make one nuance because I've lived it. It doesn't matter how close you've heard it from Fenn in some cases. If you are in his private home and he asks you something and says, well, haven't you considered this? And then rolls his eyes, even though it came directly from him, buyer beware, P.T. Barnum, he's not going to give you hint. And so I think a lot, like the one reporter was like, I got a hint, I'm going to Yellowstone. And everybody's like, how unfair is that? No, he didn't come home with it. So I do think some of the very, even if it's firsthand, because I mean, he asked me my search location for the first time when I met him just a couple months ago. And I'm sorry I said anything because it's like, what did that look mean? What did that eye roll mean? And I go back and forth like on Monty Python. It's just, you can't, even if it's close to Fenn, except I do believe like the 5,000, the 10-2, all of those are legitimate. But I think the only way we're going to find this is to do something different, and we're going to trick it out of him. And it's not going to be the way that he tells us to do it. And I think some of us might finally be coming together and wanting that conversation to be at the forefront, which is exciting.
I'm going to tell you that a lot more of the conversations that we're going to have in the future is considering the possibility that the only way to resolve this is to do it in a way that is almost diametrically opposed to how we've been advised to do it. So we're going to continue to look at those options. Doesn't mean we're right or wrong. We don't have the treasure. We often say we don't know where the treasure is, but we're going to start looking at this in a very different way, especially over the winter. So, Pam, same question: is it blasphemy to say that we're just going to quit following his advice about hints and clues and go off and learn to do things differently, or should we stick with the model that he gave? Is it safer to stick with the model that he gave us?
Well, obviously, everybody's missing something. Even Forrest Fenn said that himself. And one thing that I learned after seeing Forrest Fenn is he's very good at what he does. And I agree, I agree with Christy, that buyer beware. And, there was one other thing that with your credible evidence, there's also the credible intelligence, and that is able to be believed or convincing, possible, has a possible ring of truth to it. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. It just has to have a ring of truth to it. So I think some of that, kind of has maybe a play in this too, that it,
how much of it is true.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that based on some of the things that he's released in the past week or so. Sean Martinez, blasphemy or not, can we ignore Fenn's advice, or do we ignore Fenn's model at our own risk?
Well, in my opinion, his model that he's given us, or essentially the map that he's laid out for us, has yet to lead anyone directly to the treasure. Now, in my opinion, not everything Fenn says is gospel, because I know the type of man that he is based on my investigation this far. Taking in all the information that has come in and analyzing it in terms of significance and location and direction, and whether it's doesn't apply at all or whatsoever. That is the way that a team would come together to find a location that they're looking for.
Agreed.
Fenn is old-fashioned. So he's giving us the old-fashioned way of, here's a map, follow it to the treasure, and X marks the spot. This poem is the map, and this is how you find it. That's an old-fashioned way of thinking, and I appreciate that, and I really respect that because it's brought us all into the community. But say this was a high-profile investigation, I would not be following Fenn's advice in finding the location in the investigation. I would approach it a different way, which is the way that I have been approaching it, and I think that that will have better results in locating the treasure, whether it's me, myself, or a group or a team of individuals, which is what, in an investigative standpoint, we would do. We would bring together a team of highly trained individuals to in different areas and different fields to investigate and solve a certain case. So
let me see if I have this right. So if Fenn was a suspect in whatever crime you were investigating, and you asked him a series of questions, and he indicated to you, provided you a solution to the crime that you were pursuing, you would weigh that in a way. You would analyze it to determine whether or not he was actually telling you the truth.
Absolutely. And essentially, I've already done that through all the interviews that have already been done on him, all of the statements that he said to different people, the different things he's put out in his book, in his poem, the comments that come out here or there, the mysterious writings, the scrapbooks, all of those are answers to questions that I could have essentially asked him myself. Now, you take all that information and you weigh and measure it, and he gives tells himself. Now, some of it is kind of comical. It's funny because people go rushing down the rabbit hole immediately, and oftentimes, and based on some statements that I've seen him made, I think he intentionally does that. And he's even had a laugh about it. So
we're going to talk about that in just a minute.
People will up and go and follow that. So, I would approach it differently.
Okay, Michael, same question asked in a different way. Am I better off, I use the word blasphemy, but it's probably not the right word. Am I better off ignoring Fenn's model and developing my own, or not? And as usual, why or why not?
Okay. Well, as usual, let me answer that question obliquely.
I saw you making notes, so there's something there.
Oh, there's a lot here.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't follow his advice. I didn't follow his template. When I first started, I had only basically internet resources and no book. I had only the poem. And relative to what I know now, that was perfectly sufficient. It got me to where I am now. And when the text came and I went through and I read all this, it expanded greatly my understanding of the solution, but there is nothing that actually flat out contradicted it.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's pretty unusual, to actually go, I think, on boots on the ground and then not to find something that flat out contradicts your initial solution, and then all these other hints slowly but surely being integrated, all these other aberrations and hints and whatever from the text. So I don't, but the thing that I find interesting is that I found no use whatsoever for his later info. It has not impacted anything. The text has, but the later info has not. So my personal experience of this is to say, absolutely, the text is filled with information which can be integrated into a solve. The later information I don't pay too much attention to. Whenever he says something, I go, does this flat out contradict something, and verify that it doesn't, and then move on. Don't pay too much attention after that.
All right. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's okay.
All right. So, Christy, I've got another question, but we do have one from the comment line directly for you. It says, Chris, I'm assuming Christy, you had mentioned that you met someone who knew what was in the original poem while in Santa Fe. What were the words or changes? Thanks.
I mentioned that, and I must have gotten, this is amazing how much I've gotten 20 emails and 10 PMs and a couple phone calls about it. It actually wasn't in Santa Fe. It was Chip up in Yellowstone, who is a cousin of Forrest Fenn. He's actually helped save a couple of searchers. Really good guy, very genuine. I believe what he said. I don't believe he was like Fenn, where he was Fenn speaking. He said that he saw the poem beforehand, and the part at the bottom that was, and I might not get it exactly right, this is where I leave my bones. That was the part that he said he saw. He said there was a previous version. Now, someone asked me, what about the stones part to rhyme with bone? And I will say, I did not hear that from Chip. So when we talk about second, third, fourth hand, this is what I heard. And he said that he actually saw it when Forrest was up, and I don't remember, it was before he hit the chest. And so that is the detail. That's as much detail as I have. I wish it was more, because everybody's asking me more questions about it. Well, what about this? What about that? Is the totality of that part of the conversation. I spent maybe 3 or 4 hours. His wife was very upset because they had the dinner. He was supposed to be home for dinner, and we just started talking, and it was 4 hours later. So he was fantastic and a genuine guy.
And I think that was one of the things that we cautioned everybody in our conversation yesterday, and that is the further you get away from source. Our biggest advantage is that we have one source. It's Forrest Fenn, and he has not only his books, but he's had interviews, both audio and video interviews from which to work. In addition to that, if you really get serious, as Pam did, you can go back to his previous work. So that one big advantage is that we have one source. The mythology around that source is actually created by what you just described, situations where I just got a text message from someone who effectively is, so there's Forrest, there's Chip and his interpretation, there's the conversation that he had with you, the conversation that you laid out somewhere enough to generate this question. And now, so we're at least 4 degrees of separation away from whatever the original source is. So at that point, it becomes mythology and is hardly actionable. You don't want to spend time trying to track that down. So one of the points...
But even further with that, Toby, what if Forrest purposely put that out to be mischievous like he is, or aberration, or whatever we want to call it? So even though we're playing the game telephone, at the beginning it came from Forrest Fenn, and he has said, look in the poem. He might have put that, did he accidentally show his cousin this poem? So then that makes it 0% to start with, rather than 100 to 80 to 60.
Well, we're going to talk about that right now. So, one of the premises that we described yesterday is that not only in the world of intelligence is there inbound intelligence and outbound intelligence, and I described the difference between the two, but there is also counterintelligence. And counterintelligence has a very express reason for happening, and you have to go through the same process. Is the counterintelligence credible? But instead of asking, is it actionable? The question that you have to ask is, does it require a response? Because sometimes the counterintelligence is designed specifically to elicit a response that tells and I use the word adversary, that's how it is in the field manual, right? He's not an adversary, he's Forrest Fenn, an 80-year-old crafty old man, but it's put out there expressly for the purpose of him collecting additional intelligence. And I'm going to give you two examples right now, and I'd like you to tell me your thoughts on these examples. And the most obvious one to me was at the beginning of this year, when in his responses to Jenny Kyle's mysterious writings in February of 2018, he responded with, "My gut feeling tells me it's going to be found this summer." That was the first one. The second one that really stuck out to me as a perfect example of counterintelligence, and I'm sure Sean Dodson will have something to say about this because it's roundtable number 3, and I know that Jason Dent had made a significant investment in it, and that's the one where Forrest says to us, well, there's a clue out there that you haven't thought of, maybe you could talk about that. That, to me, is counterintelligence put out there expressly for the purpose of confusing the issue. So you started this, Christy. I was going to pick up on it. So you tell me, how good is Forrest at counterintelligence, and how bad are we at recognizing it?
Oh, I don't think we're bad. I think so. I'll start with that. I don't think we're bad. I think when it hits our solve, we're so excited because it confirms, it's confirmation bias. So the gut feeling comment at the end of the search season, I asked, well, a month ago, I asked him and said, gut feeling. And he's like, it was based on nothing. Everybody, when we did the Thor poll, who's he talking about? Or is he talking about you? And 25 people said, yes, he's talking about me. He is brilliant at it. And a lot of people think he just says stuff and it's not a big deal. He knows, he sneezes, and we believe that is a hint or a clue or whatever we want to call it. So I think it is absolutely part of, and sometimes though, I think some of the scrapbooks, he is just telling a story about himself. I don't think, and some people confirm it, and that's the reason I think Michael brought up about not using certain information. I'm sorry I read the book. I'm not sorry because of the great stories, but you can confirm almost every solve somewhere in that book, and I think it distracts more than helps from a solve standpoint. So I think he's brilliant with, and how many misspellings does he have? And Sean had said he was an investigator, so let's not take it as gospel. I'm not an investigator. I could just read, and there are what we call conundrums. There's a great thread on Thor on all the conundrums where he said something and then exactly the opposite something, because I think he's a storyteller and he gets it right 85% of the time. He doesn't care about the rest. But out of his books, like I have $17 a square inch, I have so many of his books, none of them have misspelling until TTOTC.
Yeah.
He has been purposeful. Now, do I think it's all bunny holes? Or it doesn't help me get to the solve because I have gone through and categorized them and gone through. He had me going in circles. So now I'm not doing it his way. He's brilliant at it, and I'm not playing your game anymore, Mr. Fenn.
That's the way. That's a good. Let's get tough. Let's get tough with him. All right, Pam. Is Fenn? Has Fenn used what I would call counterintelligence, things that, confuse the market, if you will? And tell me a little bit about your favorite piece of Fenn counterintelligence and why you just went, oh, no, I am not falling for that, Mr. Fenn.
Yeah, I have on my notes, I have beware of the rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, when he said he had a gut feeling that the treasure chest was going to be found this summer soon, I think that everybody was jumping on that. I was, but was that something that you should take action on? Not really. Other than the fact that I think it stirred everybody up, everybody wanted to get out there and start searching. I really think that a lot of people searched earlier this year, even before it was search season.
Agreed.
Because it stirred it up so much. I mean, we wanted to get out there so quick. But the other one that what was the other one he talked about that, I'm trying to remember now, the next one that you just said.
The clue that no one has
Oh,
thought of.
the clue one that no one has thought of.
Now
Yeah.
that one is more to take action on, because you start digging back into the poem some more. But I think that Forrest Fenn, he's a genius.
He's a tricky little. What is it?
He is.
Yeah, he's
I
a
wanted
tricky
to
little.
ask Michael something real quick though. Michael,
ahead.
when you talk about the text, is that the text you're talking about in the book?
Yes, when I say the text, I mean the entire text of the book.
Okay.
All
Minus the poem, because the
Okay.
poem is its own category.
so,
And minus the drawings, or are the illustrations a part of that analysis?
They, on their face, they should be part together with the text, but I think they should be ruled out simply because it's quite documented that Forrest did not exercise control in their production. And because of that, they're useless.
all right, let me go down to Sean. Sean, and I'm going to look forward to hearing your opinion on this. Fenn, the master of counterintelligence, and what are his most recent examples?
Well, he's very good at it. From what I've gathered, he's very good at giving it, and people scramble. People start. That's their new clue. They put it in the category of it's up there with the 9 in the poem, the 9 core. It's their new rabbit hole to chase, something to do, somewhere to go. Hearing about this summer, his gut feeling. I took that directly as counterintelligence, and I kept it in the back of my mind, but it wasn't at the forefront. It wasn't something that had me scrambling, looking for, what did I miss? What does he mean by this? However, I categorized it in my solution in the back of my mind, in that area, that should I come across something that would implicate that statement, then I would give it more credit. And, I didn't initially. However, early on in the summer, as I was preparing my solutions, I did come across something that, in my opinion, it fit together with that statement. And it's something that's direct and personal in regards to Fenn early this year when he made that statement. So I didn't give it the weight that some people do, many people do, but I believe it should be categorized and remembered just in case you come across that, along with any of the other information or hints, clues, however people want to call them, whatever they want to say. It needs to be categorized and remembered so that should you come across that information in your own solution, it can be recalled immediately and utilized if necessary. In addition to that, I was on Fenn Treasure Hunters the night that the one good clue statement came out, and Jason Dent informed me of it the day before, so I could be thinking about that. And that is a statement that I believe if it was followed up with something else, the one good clue in regards to rabbit holes, or in regards to Native American Indians, or in regards to rivers, or if he gave just a little bit more, then it would have some significance. However, he left it so open-ended that one good clue that searchers could think about themselves but haven't could be anything. So yes, absolutely counterintelligence there. It's information that is going to send people scrambling.
And shouldn't. Right.
And shouldn't. No, they shouldn't. I mean, if he gave you one more word in that was descriptive, then I would consider it and give it more weight. But
let's ask him to clarify. What did he clarify?
We'll do it over on Thor. That's what you need to do. Shelley Carney, I do see your hand raised, but let me get this question asked of Michael, and then I'll come back to you. And then I've got another question from the text line. And a reminder, guys, if you want to make sure your question gets asked tonight, send me a text to 1-800-947-1043. You'll see the number up above me right here. All right, Michael. Forrest Fenn, master of counterintelligence, or am I overestimating his capacity for humor?
He is not exercising counterintelligence. Okay. Not at all. Okay. Let me explain just for the 2 examples.
Well, you're going to have to.
One, gut feeling is not counterintelligence because it has no impact on people's actual solutions. Therefore, it cannot be counterintelligence. It is him having fun. Okay? He clearly is revealing something to people who are interested in building a psychological profile. He is somebody who is having a hard time staying on the sidelines. He wants to interact. He wants to get involved. He wants to stir things up. And I think it's because he's simultaneously entertained by what's going on and frustrated by what's going on. But it is not counterintelligence. It cannot be, because there is no way in which we are being influenced towards a different solution process. Okay. Second one good clue out there. That is, this is one that I would concede. If you want to call it counterintelligence, I would not argue too much against that, because it is designed to change people's thinking.
I respect that from you, Michael Hope.
Okay, that one is counterintelligence, perhaps. But counterintelligence, the term, presupposes certain motives, and that the motives are what I disagree with. Okay, I think Forrest, the type of frustration that I think he has, I recognize as an educator. Okay, just because something, a poem, an assignment, a lecture, is laid out in a certain way, doesn't mean that it's going to be received in the way that the lecturer, the educator anticipated. And I would say for something as complex and as enigmatic as a treasure hunt, you will never find somebody who designs something like this, no matter how smart they are, no matter how talented they are, there will always be surprises in how people interpret or misinterpret things. I have given lectures where I thought I was being totally clear in getting certain points across, and I've been faced with mystified students, and I've been shocked and had to reassess my whole model of what was going on based on their responses.
Yeah.
And that must be really frustrating to him.
Yeah. Too much too soon.
One good clue out there is in his opinion, and that could be legitimate. He could be literally legitimately trying to help us because he sees the thinking process in a certain way, but it's unlikely to fit most of us.
All right, so let me make sure I understand. In your opinion, this most recent comment about the one good clue is an indication to you that a clue exists, and he's frustrated that we don't see it, recognize it. Yeah, interesting.
Yes. But I disagree with him that the way he sees it is the only way to it. Now, you've been saying, who was saying that, I think Christie was basically saying, we're just not going to follow his path. That's idea to a certain extent, right? Find your own way is good, because you have to acknowledge that his line, because it's not laid out mechanically and logically, because there's a lot of intuition, intuiting from his writing. You don't necessarily have to follow his line, but at the end, you must reach his understanding.
Absolutely.
You must understand the text. There are things there which are relevant, and a lot of it is relevant. And if you think that you can find the treasure without that full understanding, then you will have been lucky. And I don't think that he hid it in a way that will allow anyone to be lucky. Some treasure hunts can be like that, but I think in this one, he's very smartly made sure that nobody will find it with luck. So therefore, take your own path, but at the end, you better be sure that you understand what he put there to be
absolutely. And then you can proceed with.
So everybody's nodding their heads at Michael's revelation.
Yeah.
Sean, go ahead. Your comment on Michael's comment, Sean.
Well, I really agree with Michael's take on that because, we need to keep his map, per se, in our box. However, that's not the only item in there. Following his path and has essentially led people in circles thus far. So let's take that information and let's analyze it in our own respect. However, that information is needed in order to get to the treasure. That information is required. But how do we deduce that, tear it apart, figure out what this clue means, where this clue is at, and then move on to the next location? That's what we're all essentially trying to do. And in the end, we will have to figure out Forrest Fenn, and that's why. That's one of the reasons why my channel is named that, Figuring Out Forrest, because if you're going to figure this out, if you're going to solve this, in my opinion, considering it hasn't been solved so far, we are all going to have to figure out Forrest Fenn, or the person who finds it is going to have to do that. Like I said, you can analyze him in a number of different ways, but his idea and his take on this one good clue that searchers could think of but haven't, I'm sure he could come up with another half dozen of those if he wanted to, because he knows where it's at. And that's just something that, Jason Dent did ask him, can you give us a word for this evening? And that's what he responded with. Should any of us other searchers ask him for a word, we could receive something just as notable as that statement. So does it get us closer to the chest?
Yeah.
Perhaps.
The big question. Wait a minute, Michael. Let me give, since K-Pro's name, Christy's name, was mentioned in your response, let me give her an opportunity for a rebuttal.
Well, the one thing that you brought up, Michael, that I'm struggling with myself, but I have ruled out myself, as you said, you have to understand it in the text. Now, I don't know if you meant you have to read the text. I'm was kitchen sink, and now, which means everything and every word made me run down every rabbit hole. And now I'm moving back towards, is it in the 166? Does it have to be in the 66,000 words that are in the TTOTC, or is it just the 166? And this is where I have to simplify. And so I'm at the point of, let's simplify with our semantics of clues and all the semantics of words that we use, and take it to a more simpler place. But I'm the first to say, I don't have the chest. I'm just struggling like the rest of us of years and more boots on the ground than, well, I mean, I have 5 or 6, but that's the next step for me, is to simplify and go back to what Toby and Shelley talked about yesterday, which is credible, reliable information. And the one video you guys did maybe a year or 2 ago, what if Forrest had passed right after the book signing? We wouldn't have had any of this, and he truly believed we would be able to figure it out. So if he believes that, we shouldn't even be looking at anything else, right?
Right. All right. Let me. Whoa! Look at that big hand there. So let me do this. Pam, comment first. Let me go to Pam with commentary on Michael's comment, and then Shelley, I will go to you for question in the room, and then I've got a question here, and then Michael, I'll come back to you. Okay?
It's okay. I'm making notes.
Yeah, I'm sure. Go ahead, Pam.
Okay, I agree with some of what Michael did say on the, as far as the text and Forrest Fenn, him being, how smart he is on what he's doing, and him saying like the credible evidence and the actionable, intelligence and all that. I don't know. I just, getting back to what you guys were talking about yesterday, Forrest Fenn he's very crafty at what he does.
I like that word. I'm going to start using it more when I describe him. Okay, Shelley, you've been waiting for a while. Let's take a couple of questions, or whatever questions you have from the room.
Okay, well, we had a super chat.
Oh, how nice.
Super chat sound.
And
a cow, because it's from Cow Lasers.
Oh, how nice. Oh, I changed it. I made a new one for him, and I didn't add it tonight.
Oh.
Did you just hear the ka-ching on your end?
I did.
Oh, okay, good. I'm going to do that again. So thank you, Mike Howling, for that kind donation to our project.
Yeah.
It'll help pay for all this. Okay. Anyway, question.
He says, Forrest Fenn said a clue will get you closer to the chest and a hint will help with clues. Do you think the clues he gave on the Today Show get you closer to the chest?
Well, I suppose the big question is whether or not those were thought of as clues, but let's go. So did the clues, and I'll go around the horn starting with Pam. Pam, did the clues he gave us on the Today Show get us closer to the chest? Closer to finding the treasure?
I don't think so. Nobody's found it yet.
Sean?
I believe they should be categorized and then used accordingly based on your solution or your investigation.
I thought a couple of them were pretty actionable. Michael, what'd you think?
I checked them to make sure that there are no contradictions with what I had, and then forgot them.
Christy?
I think they're the most actionable that we have out there of the information. We need to use it.
I'll go with that response because we feel the same way. All right, let me. Shelley, did you have another question from the room?
Let's see. Well, I had Julie Smith, and she's asking if you had to choose one Fenn quote that was potentially helpful, which one would it be?
Christy?
Oh, of course. Surprise words #1 to Christy.
Which was?
Which was, if you're walking long distances, you're walking too far, which to me is 1 mile. So the treasure chest is not more than a half mile from the parking spot. You can look at exact words wherever, but that's the summary because it was to me with my name.
And I think we should accept the possibility of paraphrase here. So, Pam, what's your favorite, most useful Fenn quote? Paraphrase. Doesn't have to be exact.
Gosh.
Top one.
I can't think of one right now.
I'll come back to you, Sean Martinez.
Very simple, very straightforward. Find my chest.
Michael, top pin? None?
None.
Okay.
I'm focused on the poem and the text.
All right. Pam, back to you. Got one?
Okay. The only thing I could think is something that he put in like more than 8.25 miles north of Santa Fe.
Okay, except he didn't say that. No. But we'll do that show in a couple of weeks. Ours
he
is
did eventually.
Yeah, he did eventually. He agreed with it. Ours is the little girl from India can't get closer than the first 2 clues. All right. No. So let me tell you. Let me read this. This is from Justin, aka Minotaur Moreno. And I'm going to start with you on this, Sean Martinez. And guys, if you're going to send me a text on here, make sure you give me your name and from what state you're writing. Justin, aka Minotaur Moreno, do the scrapbooks, weekly words, weekly questions, interview quotes contain clues? If so, what percentage? So see, here's where this thing is. You know, even in the question itself, there is a sense that you have to define what are clues in order to answer that question. But let me read it again quickly. So I cheated you that. Do the scrapbooks, weekly words, weekly questions, interview questions contain clues? If so, what percentage? And I assume what percentage of all that he said in all of those contain clues? What do you think, Sean?
I believe they contain information or intelligence in regards to my specific investigation into Forrest Fenn and locating his chest. The hints and clues, we've essentially scrapped that, and we're looking at it from a different angle in regards to information, intelligence, and the categories of that information. So it should be filtered, it should be categorized, it should be gone through, and if you can, some people have minds like this, remembered, just in case you come across that in the field or anywhere in your investigation, and it does apply to your specific solution, you have that. It's very similar to the text and the book as a whole. Suppose Forrest Fenn walked right up to you and gave you this book and this poem and this map and said, here you go find my chest. Now the book should be gone through and that information stored as you go on and continue with your investigation. I believe the scrapbooks and all of the other things should be viewed the same way. They should be gone through. And just like Michael Hu said earlier, there's some things that he forgets about. Those are things that he's sorted, he's filtered, and now have been forgotten. So I agree with that.
I think I know the answer to this question, Michael, but give it to us. Well, all that stuff that he's given to us after the fact, if you will. What percentage are clues? What contain clues?
New information?
Yeah, the new information after.
Yeah, no, but is it new information? Is
Yeah.
it necessary?
Right.
Is it something that we need? No. It's good. I mean, a lot of it was out there for safety reasons. It helps us to eliminate things which are unproductive, but I don't think it does it in a way that gives us really any advantage towards finding.
And he's told us that. He's never given us a clue that's going to help us find the treasure.
And I respect him for that.
Yeah.
It's a mark of integrity that he doesn't do this.
Yeah. Christy, what do you think? All that stuff after the fact, what's its worth?
Kitchen sink Christy loves it all, but at the end of the day, I keep going back to just the poem, a little bit of, I mean, what everybody says, but I jump down that bunny hole every day, every quote, every thought. So I wish in a perfect world I wasn't the type of person I was, but this is why you partner up with someone who's a poem purist, and they ground you right back all the time. But yeah, so I want to be one way, but I fall for the brilliant, or what word did Pam use? The
crafty.
Crafty for me, crafty, and he
like
every time. Darn it.
Yeah, Pam, what do you think?
I like to read a lot of it. I'm not real familiar with the scrapbooks, but I have read a little bit. I do like to read the information. And some of it I do look at and research, but for the most part, I don't think that there's anything in there that I found so far that will help me find the chest.
All right. We're 3 minutes away from our outros here, but in 30 seconds, give me your summary of this conversation. Christy, you first.
That Forrest is crafty, and we need to start looking at this and solving this in a different way and take it. We got to take it, but we've got to figure out how to do that. And I think Sean's right. We've got to start working together and thinking about this differently. I haven't figured that out, though, because during an investigation, it's easy because you're all working towards the same goal. If someone else works towards this goal, they might steal it from me, or that's what most people think. They're not collaborating as much. So that's maybe a future one. But hints, clues, semantics, let's think of this differently. Let's not do it the Fenn way, because that hasn't worked well for us for 8 years.
Michael, your summary of our conversation tonight.
Okay, so by means of a summary, I'm going to address Christy's point, because it summarizes everything. Christy asked whether the text is needed. I don't think that it is hints versus clues. I think it's poem versus text, and that the text is important. And the argument for that is the poem has too low an info content to actually narrow down to a specific spot. Search areas, people who've been boots on the ground know that they're very complex. There's not enough info content. The poem can bring you to the treasure, but it will not help you uncover it. And the other point for the text is that it is filled with emotional content, which means a lot to Forrest. He has poured things which are important to him here, and I doubt very much that you can find the treasure without understanding how and why these important things relate to the treasure. The text, even though he may have said that the poem is all you need, I think that in practice, okay, Fenn the educator needs to understand that for us, the text will become essential.
Michael, the last thing I wanted to say before we say our good nights is if you'll take the time to scan those notes of yours and send them to me, I feel like there's probably three or four programs we could get out of those notes. So either that or you need your own YouTube channel, brother.
That's the last thing I need in my life is the responsibility of a YouTube channel, and especially you showing me how complex it really is. There's nothing here.
No, Michael, trust me. Send them to me.
There's nothing here that I can't reveal. So
okay. All right. Yeah, send them to me. Just take a picture, scan them, send them to me, and I will give you credit for every one of the 7 or 8 shows I get out of those notes. How's that?
I drew some Zias too.
Sean Martinez, give me a summary of tonight's conversation.
Well, the treasure not being located thus far after 8 years of searchers going out and searching. And that number is just increasing, especially when you see these mainstream channels and media
Yeah.
really pushing it and getting the millennial group involved, which has happened over this summer, I believe. There's been a huge influx of new searchers into it. So, with all of that going on, I believe a new direction of application should be utilized by groups of searchers or key searchers in the community, heads coming together, which is essentially what YouTube has been doing recently. But is our primary goal to find this chest? If it was, I would be sitting across the table from any number of one of you on a weekend somewhere, a group coming together, and you know what? This is essential. This is what we're looking to do. Let's get this done now. And so that's really what I've taken from it, is that if we want this chest found, I believe with all of the minds, all of the thinkers that are in the community right now, that we can make it happen as a group, as a whole. I believe just based on what I know of Forrest, part of his idea for it being found is that a good old boy with the same mindset, just like him, that would understand his instruction to the class 100%, is going to find this. And possibly that will happen one day. And that's who the poem was written for. That's who the book was written for. And that person may come along. However, a different approach can be taken to find the chest. So hopefully that'll happen soon, and we'll get this thing found.
Thank you for that 30-second summary, Sean Martinez. I appreciate
Very good.
Pam, 30-second summary of tonight's show.
I am just so surprised that nobody has found that chest. I mean, by now, there are so many really smart people out there in that search. But Toby, I think you've given me a lot to think about. I think I have to do my homework here.
Shelley, one of these times when you visit with Shelley, tell her,
Yes.
ask her about that line. You've given me a lot to think about. It's actually it's a sales line. If you spend an hour selling to somebody and the response is you've given me a lot to think about, they're not buying from you. So
That's right.
all right, let's say our good nights. Let's start, Christy. Where can people find you, and what have you got upcoming?
Raven's Nest on YouTube. There is going to be an announcement on Monday for just a fun project. Oh, and I will say AGK is getting one of these.
Thank you.
And we're doing some contests because I have worked Mike out of every coin he has a couple left, but I have some coins. And so we're starting to do these contests and we're having a good time. And then, of course, Hint of Riches is the forum that I try to link the two together, and that's where I live.
And I can assure our audience that we will take that coin and hide it somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe, so that you can find. Mike, where can people get in touch with you?
meh.at.tyo@gmail.com.
And by the way, I'm already getting requests to share your notes, so make sure you send them to me.
Sell them.
Yeah.
Sean Martinez, where can people get in touch with you?
Figuring Out Forrest on YouTube, Figuring Out Forrest Fenn on Facebook, and figuringoutforrest@gmail.com. And I do have a boots on the ground that I have had to reschedule. Hopefully that will be coming up here in October.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be forthcoming, and I'll be able to discuss what we find on that.
Great. Pam?
I'm Ramblin' Pam on YouTube and Ramblin' Pam on Facebook.
And you're doing a lot of great work. Okay.
Thank you.
You and your husband both. And by the way, if I didn't say thank you already, thanks for having breakfast at the Range Cafe when you guys came through town. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
That was fun.
So, Shelley Carney, last but not least.
I'm Shelley Carney with Gypsy's Kiss and The Softer Side. Tomorrow on A Gypsy's Kiss, we'll be talking about chapter 25, the Ode to Peggy G. It's a very short chapter. Just talks a little bit about Forrest going through cancer and his family being there for him. So there's a chance for a lot of people to call in and text in tomorrow and chat with us. So I hope that you'll take advantage of that.
And what are you doing on the softer side tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night, we're talking about too sexy, too soon. And we're basically talking about how much is too much, how soon is too soon, and what happens when you dive into a sexual relationship too soon.
So you don't actually need me for that program, right? I mean,
of course I need you.
All right, so
all the production.
yeah. So a couple of things. Number one, as Shelley said, we've got the book club tomorrow at 1:00 Mountain Daylight Time, and then we have the softer side tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Sounds interesting. They're both good programs for different reasons. Friday, we have the Forrest Fenn Friday Fandango, but we are doing a live stream of It's All About You, number 14 this week. Our subject is of the feminine persuasion and a really interesting personality. So make sure you tune in because you'll be able to text in your questions to ask of her. And then I had told you that on Friday we were going to do a special web conference to discuss our winter programming.
Saturday.
I'm sorry, Saturday night, but I'm going to cancel that. And the reason is that I've discovered, not that it wasn't out there already, I've discovered the application, the online application called Discord. And I feel like it's a much better tool for us to accomplish that. And the reason is it doesn't require as much technology investment to be able to participate. So I'm going to ask you to give me a week to completely absorb how the technology works. And then next week, I'll let you know what day we're going to do that, in this case, a Discord conference, so you can express your opinions on what Gypsy's Kiss will be doing in terms of winter programming. Okay, so forgive me for that. I just found out about it today, started playing with it, realized that this is a much better tool for what we want to accomplish. And if you're not already, join Discord, and then I'll tell you how to let me know your what is it, Shelley? The contact number, the tag number, or whatever. But we'll be using Discord to hold that web conference. And again, I've decided to do that because it's much easier technology. Thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. I'd like to thank each of our panel members for taking the time to join us, and the forethought and investment in research time that they took to make this quality program and a quality discussion, because I always feel like we learn from these situations, from these panels. And we will actually have another announcement for you next week about how we're going to further extend our footprint on the internet with things like our panels, but we'll talk about that next week. And then, of course, to our moderators, thank you for being here tonight and keeping the room active and comfortable and providing information when you can. And then finally, to those of you who are watching tonight, Shelley and I very much appreciate that you have a lot of choices when it comes to flying these various airlines. We're just one of them, and we very much appreciate the choice that you make by being with us tonight. So thanks very much. I've got a new outro for you. You may have seen it on my lineup. And again, panelists, thank you for joining us tonight. It was a lot of fun, very informative.